Hello, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this Friday early afternoon for Like, Comment, Buy Social Media for Business. I'm going to share my screen just to kick us off for the event. The magic of two screens really coming in clutch today. Whoops. Okay. So before we start, we usually like to do a few icebreaker questions just to get a sense of who is in the space. So if you head to slido.com and you enter the code social1, and feel free to answer the first poll question. So what industry is your business in? As you know, our panelists all have a variety of experiences, but we would like to know what space that you're in and maybe how we can best suit this conversation moving forward. So feel free if you go to slido.com, and I'll put it in the chat as well so everyone has, and you can use the code social1. Had to think about it for a second. Awesome. And if you don't see your industry, I could have listed a ton of them. If you don't see your industry on the screen, feel free to just drop in the chat to all panelists and attendees the industry your business is in. So a lot of folks that are here just to learn. I appreciate the honesty. We're all on the same level when it comes to this topic. Then followed by a bunch of folks in the food, design, fashion, and music spaces. So kind of a good variety. So a few folks in marketing as well. A lot of folks just here to learn, and that is quite all right. So we just got a question. Someone asked if this recording will be shared with us. Yes, you will receive it probably, I would say, on Monday. Actually, excuse me, Tuesday, because it is a holiday on Monday, and sometimes will land in your spam folder, so feel free to check there. Awesome. I'm going to let a few more folks respond before we go into our second question, and then I'll kick us off. I know we're early today, starting a little early. It's great. Sweet, I see some more folks just joined us. We're going to get started on our second icebreaker question. If you guys don't know, we're at slido.com, and you can use the event code social1 to participate in these icebreaker questions. Sweet, so a lot of folks really just here to learn. I love this. I'm really excited to learn from our experts as well. Excuse me. Okay, so our next question is, what are you hoping to learn from today's session? Is it, how do you start with social media for your business? Or there's so many tools nowadays. What is the best tools for my business? Feel free to put it on slido.com with the code social1 of what you're hoping to learn from this session. Or if you don't feel comfortable sharing there, feel free to just put it in the chat. I could read that off as well. Okay. So see what the newest platforms are. I think that's really important, especially given the pivot that all of us have made in the last 3 months. There are a ton of new platforms that we all could be using. A strategic approach to, so many things happening. A strategic approach to maximizing the effectiveness of social media, just to gain more knowledge of social media, how to plan a social media strategy to gain leads, how to monetize what I offer. Let's see what other good ones that we got in here. I don't know how to market my products. That's also very, very honest sharing. I appreciate that. We're all trying and learning in this space, I like to say, for all of our events. Let's see what else we have. How to use social media to grow my business through engagement and convert that into sales. Sweet. How to search Twitter for best and latest information and networks on a topic. And then also, I guess someone just started their new business and they're looking to figure out how to launch. So this is great. Anything else? Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to take off our icebreaker questions and get us started. Feel free again, I will be in the chat if you have any questions or concerns. Feel free to just chat all panelists and attendees and I will respond to you. Did I lose my slides? So first off, I just want to say thank you again. My name is Lauren Rogers. I'm an events producer at General Assembly based in New York. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Like, Comment, Buy Social Media for Businesses, the second event of our series with our great friends at Rise. We're doing it's called a latte of career advice. So you have the opportunity to learn all these different tips and tricks to kind of revamp your career. Here is just a little rundown of what we have planned for the rest of the month. If any of those are interesting to you, I will share those after the event as well. So thank you again to our friends at Rise. I'll also put in a discount code. They're giving about 35% off of coffee, which is relatively exciting, especially now during quarantine. If this is your first time at a General Assembly event, welcome, welcome, welcome. General Assembly is a tech and global educational company. We started off as a co-working space back in 2011. And one of the requirements for all of our members was that they had to teach other members something new. So whether you are an expert in UX design or business or social media, and as we continue to grow as a company, we really saw the value of the peer-to-peer educational space. I can say 9 years later, that's all that we do. We have students learning with us on a full-time and part-time basis. And then, of course, we meet folks that are just interested in upskilling, whether you're interested in learning how to do Excel in 2 hours or you want to know how to revamp your LinkedIn. I really like to tell folks GA is kind of just a resource for you, no matter where you are in your career. Usually I would say come visit us at a campus near you, but as you can imagine, we are all currently operating remotely given the pandemic. Hopefully you will see more of us in the new year. A few meeting norms. Feel free to use the Zoom chat, as I mentioned, and the Q&A function that is also open. This event will be recorded, as I mentioned before. You'll probably get it on Tuesday, just given we're closed on Monday. Highly encourage you to get involved with General Assembly, and then, of course, the organizations that all of these women work at. And we'll follow up with more information how you can stay in touch with all of them post-event. And then lastly, feel free to share your experience on social media. We are at GA_New York and at Rise Brewing Co. on Instagram. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to just tell you a little bit about our moderator for today, Lauren Ramsey. So Lauren is a social media content strategist, podcaster, promoter of brands and bands through Betsy Bash, a boutique social media agency. She has worked with multi-million-dollar consulting firms, the New York Times bestseller authors, and Walt Disney Corporation, just to name a few. And you can hear her interviews with musicians, chefs, and discover cultural curious events by tuning into her podcast, Lauren Ignited. It's always so funny saying Lauren Ignited. I'm like talking about myself. So without further ado, I will pass it along to Lauren Ramsey.
Thank you so much, Lauren. All right, so I'm so excited to get talking to you both ladies, Bryna and Mallory, about social. I talk about social all day long, live and breathe it, as I'm sure you do. And I'm just so interested to hear more about your careers and how it has shaped over the past 10 years. So Bryna, can you just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your role at Lyft and a short history of how you got to where you are in social?
Yeah, so I'm actually pretty new to Lyft. I'm coming into the end of my 4th month. So I was interviewing just before COVID hit and then landed at Lyft after COVID. And you can imagine, you know, with the pandemic, rideshare's down overall because, you know, not a lot of people are going to bars and concerts anymore. And so it's been an interesting time to kind of get scrappy and kind of think through, like, how do we continue to at least market for the future, but also like continue to provide services for people who are maybe essential workers and so on. So yeah, so I'm still pretty new to Lyft overall. Prior to Lyft, I was at Stitch Fix, where I headed up social media, influencer, and content marketing all up, which that included, you know, our editorial blog content, our video strategy, our social, and then influencer. And prior to that, I was at Dolby for about a year, where I tend to gravitate towards these roles where it's kind of like the first ever team focused on social and content inside these companies. And was part of a team that was spearheading
getting like a challenge.
Yes, like building things from the ground up. Yeah, and I was part of a team that was helping Dolby's reach more of a B2C audience. They tend to be more B2B for the last few years. So, and then prior to that, I was on the agency side for a really long time, where I worked on a bunch of clients at different stages of their digital maturity, different budget sizes, different brand recognition, levels of brand recognition. And then originally grew up inside HP. That was like my first in-house role, where I spent almost 8 years there on the first ever digital team. So it's been a lot of in-house, agency, startup. I like I said, back half of my career, I tend to gravitate towards teams where we're the first ever team, or like there's an opportunity to build.
Yeah. And I think, with your career, you kind of got in on social in the beginning anyhow. So
exactly. Yeah.
What was that first spark for you that interested you in social?
So I actually started, I went to school for web design and UX. So I actually had daydreams of, running my own design agency. And at the time when I graduated, HP was going through a change where they were trying to consolidate all of their creative and in-house, or all of their agency work into in-house agency. And so I was like this, green, fresh out of school designer who had a chance to come in-house and work on HP.com and build landing pages and, optimize for search, et cetera. And so through that experience, I really started to see the value of like content and search and the journey, the user journey of like someone landing on a landing page, and then like how they navigated to cart. And so that kind of sparked my interest in how design can influence purchase, essentially. And then I always say this to folks, like I happened to be born at the right time, I think, when like social was brand new. So this idea of like, what is Facebook, back in like 2004 or 5, companies had never seen that before. And so HP, like everybody else, was like, this isn't going away. We should probably figure out how we show up there as a brand, and like, what is community management? And I think because I had all of that sort of content digital experience with the .com, it was just a natural progression over to that side of the house, where we basically spearheaded all of the platforms for the global company and like set the standard of how we show up there.
That's great. And that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And so Mallory, I saw you shaking your head a lot. So this resonates with you. So tell me a little bit about your amazing career to date and how you got to where you are now, and what sparked your love for social.
Yeah, totally resonated with me. Like you, I also kind of like grew up in the perfect time, the perfect place, being on social media in like 2008, 2009. My first job was actually self-created in social media. I went to school for music, as you can see by my piano behind me. I classically trained in piano performance. I went to grad school at NYU for film scoring. I actually wanted to be a film producer and a film scorer. That's what I went to school for. And I happened to graduate in the middle of the recession, and I had just started using Twitter. And I was working at the time at a health video production company, literally transcribing health videos, like the testimonials that you'd see for a Novartis commercial. That was my first job.
Sure.
And I happened to be watching these videos, and I walked into the CEO's office and I said, we should be using these videos on Twitter and try to build up a community around our content, because I use Twitter personally. I went to school, I like wrote on a school paper, I understand the value of content. And he said, oh, that's a great idea. Go figure that out. And I had no background in marketing at the time. My father's actually like a marketer, so I come from a long line of marketers. So I literally took out every single book that I could from the library, read every single article that I could on Buffer, about social media marketing to try to connect the dots between my creative experience and making messaging to elevate stories. And I did such a great job that they literally gave me the job of social media manager. And from there, I've worked at a number of different media publications and agencies. So I've worked at Engadget, which is a tech publication. I've worked at Popular Science Magazine, which is the oldest science magazine in the United States. I've worked for BlackBerry during their bankruptcy, which was a fun study in crisis management for me. And then most recently, prior to my current role at Vox Media, I was working for Lacoste on their global social media team. So I was actually, like Brenna said, I was one of like the first people on the continent to actually do social media for Lacoste, since, as you can imagine, Lacoste's team is all based in Paris. So I had to develop the strategy. I had to develop the customer service response times. I had to work with influencers. They gave me a 6-figure budget to produce content at the Miami Open. I spearheaded their use of Facebook Live, which is kind of ironic in 2017, but it just was really a great experience for me to go brand side. And from there, I kind of took a pivot into my current role at Vox Media, where I'm actually doing affiliate marketing and e-commerce strategy. So actually really connecting the dots between content and purchase. So basically my role is to get these high intent shoppers and try to convince them to stay on our sites, to continue to shop, and working with all of our editorial teams from New York Magazine, The Strategist, The Verge, Polygon, Eater Curbed, to just really turn their readers into loyal shoppers of Vox Media. And as you can imagine, this has been one of the busiest times for our team, since brick and mortar is essentially closed for all intents and purposes. So we have really spearheaded our e-com growth for Vox Media. And we actually just launched a 2-day sale, which we did in July. An idea that I came up with that was literally piggybacked off the thesis of, can we do our own Amazon Prime Day as an editorial company and use content and distribute everything on our own internally on social using all of our channels and our own spend. And it was very successful. And we've seen many other publishers following suit in the past couple of weeks. So I'm very happy to be here today.
That's fantastic. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's amazing. So for everybody that answered the poll earlier and said that they're new to social, they're new to marketing, we were all there at one point, right? As you can hear from our journeys into social. Social just started, 10, 15 years ago, becoming a business, right? So you're in a good place to learn from the three of us. All right, so let's talk a little bit about, how do you first approach a campaign, right? What are the elements that you think about when you're crafting a strategy? And Mallory, I'll ask you this, what is the first question you ask yourself when you're looking at a campaign?
So the first question is really comes down to the key business objectives and what are your KPIs, your key performance indicators, because that is really going to determine like what your focus should be and whether social makes sense for you and which platform you should be targeting. So I've worked with B2C, B2B clients. Like I always tell them, it goes back to your objectives. If you're a B2C client and you're really trying to drive sales, make connections with your audience, like it's a no-brainer for you to be on Facebook, a no-brainer for you to be on Instagram. If you're more of like a B2B company, obviously it's a no-brainer for you to be on LinkedIn to try to connect with other professionals. But I think that the cornerstone of like every strategy comes down to your objectives and what you're trying to do, whether you just want to grow awareness or you're trying to actually drive sales and conversions.
So let's talk about that a little bit between the two of you ladies. So when you're, how do you decide on the key objectives? How do you limit them down to the number that you can handle or the ones that are really the most important? Kind of walk us through that process, especially for people that answered, that they're not sure how to market their products. They're not sure how to use social media. So through that lens, how do you decide on the key objectives? And Bryna, we'll kick it off to you first.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think for me, what also, like if you're thinking about the product experience and what you do as a company and like what your product offers, I think it's important to start there. What are the benefits? Like, why should I, scrolling through Instagram, thumb stop and look at what you're offering me, right? What is the benefit to me? So I think thinking through the messaging of your product, the value it can provide, I think thinking through also who you're trying to talk to, who you're trying to reach. Like, is this, millennial audience? Is this a boomer audience? Is this Gen Z? Because how, to Mallory's point, thinking through like, okay, if it's just an awareness play, like if no one has ever heard of your company or your product, like you're going to probably want to start with like just building awareness for it, right? So starting with like your core KPIs, and I think then reverse engineering that into, okay, so if it's awareness, what is the message, the value proposition, the benefits of my product? And then how can I tailor that to the specific audience that I'm trying to reach? Mm-hmm. Then which platforms are those audiences most active on? And so I think like if you're a B2B company, that journey from, KPI to audience to messaging to platform is going to be very different than say like Stitch Fix, where it's like we're a fashion company and it's like a very different, female forward or female focused audience. So so I think like just really taking a step back and thinking through like what is the value of your product and how are you different and what is the benefit to someone who how do you articulate that, and think about like also their daily lives. You're interrupting their feeds or you're interrupting their day with an ad. Like, how can you grab that attention and make sure that it resonates with them specifically?
Yeah, that's like such a great point. I always tell people to just be authentic. I am sure, as you have seen some cringeworthy social posts and ads that have been floating around Twitter. We're in a time where people are more than willing to talk back to the brands that they're following to say, hey, this is not what I believe in, do better. So I always say, be authentic. You don't have to be on every single social platform. In fact, like if you're a B2B company, maybe it doesn't make sense for you to be on TikTok. Just go to the platforms where you can connect to your audience. Brent was saying, if you're a boomer brand, like TikTok might not make sense for you. You might make more sense to just stick with Facebook and maybe Pinterest. But it just really makes sense for you to be authentic and don't try to do something that is not like, doesn't make sense to your brand.
Yeah, and I think, that's a conversation I was having with someone recently about, for people like, especially like us three and people like us, we've grown up on social, right? We were born at the right time, so to speak. And we know bad content, right? We've seen bad content for years and years and years. And so if you're trying to get your brand out there right now, especially, you have to put that eye on content and strategy if you want to get our attention.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
So let's talk a little bit about audience. So Bryna and Mallory both touched on this, right? And finding the right messaging for the right audience. So let's say you're a brand new brand, right? You've just launched your brand in 2020 and you've got, I don't know, maybe an extra $500 for ads every month. What would you recommend as an audience to strategy connection? Would you say one campaign across multiple audiences, or would you say one campaign, one audience, just keep it simple? How would you think through that as a startup?
That's a great question. I always personally believe in looking at your competitors and surveying, even at such an early stage, the life cycle of your business. You cannot get any better information than if you're surveying your actual potential customers and even friends, people that you know that you are trying to market to. Survey them and try to get some information on what they're looking to see, because that will help you determine, as we like to say in the industry, the marketing personas of your audience. So if you have that information from an audience survey, you can then take that information, pull out some key insights, come up with those personas, and help you figure out where you want to spend your dollars, whether you're spending $100 a month in an Instagram ad campaign, or if you're launching a newsletter, because we all know that high intent and loyal audiences love newsletters. So I think that surveying and figuring out who that audience is with insights and data will be your best bet forward.
Yeah, I would just add to, like, these platforms, we're on them, we use them, you know, we find value in them, obviously, as companies, but they will gladly take your money. You know what I mean? Like, if you just set your targeting to every human in the world, or every human in North America who's 18 to 65, they will just run all day ads until your money's gone. So I think, to Mallory's point, like, just taking a step back and just really thinking about, like, who am I trying to reach? Are they in a specific geography? Do they have specific interests? Are they associated with specific Facebook groups or Instagram? You know, do they, you know, lookalike audiences, etc., so that you can kind of get it somewhat tight. And then from there, I think you just optimize, right? So, like, you run the ad for like 2 weeks, you see your clicks aren't as high as you thought, or like they were really strong in the first couple days and then they dropped off. Why is that? Is it the creative? Is it your targeting? Maybe you just need to, like, tweak until you get to a point where you have a really strong cost per click and, like, you're seeing conversions go up. So I think, you know, make the $500 count by really paying attention to the audience and, like, just continuing to optimize, because, I mean, all brands are on these platforms. There's value in it. It's just, you have to be really, really smart about, it's almost like an art and a science, like, just keep refining it, because eventually you will find the right audience, and then all of a sudden it's like, you know, 50 cents a click or $1 a click versus like 6 to 10, you know. So you'll get there eventually, but if you just kind of, like, set it and forget it, they will gladly eat up your budget within days.
Right.
Yeah.
And I love that you mentioned the art and the science, because I think that explains marketing and social, and especially ads, so well. So how do you know when it's time to, let's see, no. How do you know when it's time to abandon your ad? I guess I'll say, or what is the shortest time period you've seen an ad do well, right? Like, getting from that $6 cost per click down to the 50 cents, you know, or maybe said another way, I think a lot of people, sometimes they run an ad and then they say it doesn't do well and they stop forever, right? So what's the limit of time that you really need to give yourself to let an ad do its thing?
You really need to have a big data set. You really need to have enough information in that pool to make an accurate decision. So it's a science, like, as Brenda said. Like, I don't think a lot of people realize how much science goes into social media marketing and ad optimization, but you're basically performing a scientific experiment, and you've got your control, you've got your objective, you've got your hypothesis. And you can just really let that run for as long as possible, frankly. But I always like to say, give it 3 weeks to about a month, so that way you have, like, a small sample size to work with. Obviously, don't take my word for it. Facebook's algorithm changes daily, hourly. So you really need to play with it and continue to, like, drill down to find that pairing of interest with demographics that's going to work for your brand and your audience and your objectives.
Yeah, I would say too, I've seen frequency is going to be a metric you want to look at. So, like, if you've been running an ad, frequency basically means how many times did it show up in a news feed or a feed of some sort, right? So if there's a frequency number of 3 or 4, let's say, right? So it's been seen me as someone, just an individual, has seen this ad at least 3 times over the last couple weeks, and I have not taken an action with it, then maybe that's a good sign that something's up, right? Like, the creative might be off, the headline, the messaging. I think if you can get to a frequency level of 2, and, like, all of a sudden you're starting to see some level of action, then that's a good sign you're on the right track. And so what ideally you would do is, let's say frequency count of 2, maybe 3, and all of a sudden they're landing on your website. Maybe they didn't buy anything, but they've landed. You know, now your next strategy would be almost like a retargeting ad play. So, like, okay, we've got a nice little pool of people who've seen this ad once, twice, 3 times, and they've taken some level of action. Now they're your retargeting pool, which would be your next ad that you would run, which would have a slightly different message, because you've already built awareness, right? They've already clicked. And so this second ad you would run would be a little bit more, maybe it's like benefits spec product feature focused to get them one more hook, right? One more click over to actually putting it in cart. So, and I also think too, the creative really matters. We've all seen like really terrible ads and you're just like, ugh. But I think going into thinking about advertising as like an A/B test, right? Like version A of creative and version B of creative. And like, yeah, you only have $500, so maybe you split the difference and you put both out in the world. And then over the course of like that first week, you will quickly see which one is like rising to the top. And that will just continue to give you some ideas on like, okay, what does my third version of my ad start to look like? Because this middle one had like a person in the photo or like in the creative, or had like didn't use a lot of text, or maybe it was a video. Like you'll start to get some creative insights that will inform your third ad, your fourth ad, your fifth ad. And then again, it just keeps coming down to like optimizing, and taking a look at your data as you run these things.
Yeah, absolutely. Mallory, anything to add there?
Now, a lot of people don't realize that you should also be like workshopping that copy. Like copy,
Yeah.
in my opinion, should be separate from your creative. So if you've got 2 versions of your creative, like maybe you should have 3 versions of copy for each piece of creative, so that way you really get a good sample size, so you can really figure out which pairing of copy and creative is going to work and get you the most frequency.
Yeah. Yep. These are great tips. So I hope everyone's jotting these down. All right, so we've talked about creative and content a little bit. So let's dive into that. So when you see good content, what does that mean to you? How do you identify good content?
To Brenna's earlier point, something that's going to get my thumb to stop.
Yeah.
Something that's going to give me a save trigger, as I call it. So on Instagram,
I like that.
It's like without thinking, save it immediately. And then you look back at your save folder and like, why did I save that? Like a lot of social and marketing and advertising is so emotional. And you need to play to those emotions to get your consumers, your audience to do something. And again, it goes back to your business objectives of what you want them to actually do. But good content is going to stop me in my tracks. It's going to make me save it. It's going to help me share it to a friend, DM it to someone on Instagram, retweet it on Twitter, put it in like a Facebook group. That's like what the core of good content is to me.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, everything Mallory just said on like striking an emotional chord. Emotional doesn't mean like tear jerky. It means like funny. It means like relatable, right? Like you kind of want to see yourself sort of like, oh yeah, that was totally me, or like I'm just like that, or your friends like, oh my god, this is so like Mallory, I'm gotta DM this to her, you know. So I think authenticity, relatability in how you speak about your product, how your creative shows up. I also think we are at a really, really interesting time, given the pandemic. I think like the high end, high gloss, like true advertisement is kind of falling away. I think people want like raw, like bad lighting, just fun, lighthearted content that's shot on an iPhone. I think what I've seen over the course of the last few years is just the high end stuff is just not clicking for people anymore. And I think when it feels like it's been produced in a scrappy, quick sort of turned way, it tends to do better. And I think that's because that's how we all like share content with our friends and family, right? We send like funny gifts, or we send like funny videos of like our kids doing whatever. So I think just the consumer in general is the appetite for authenticity in creative and content is, I think, just especially given the pandemic, we're just at an all-time high, I think, for that stuff.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like even 5 years ago, I would tell people to do these really laborious content calendars and have really like thought out content buckets for every day of the week. But now I kind of tell people it's great to have your general themes of what you want your content to be, but it's okay if it doesn't need to fit into a bucket. Just be yourself, be authentic. You don't need to use filters anymore. I really think that what's happening with Versus on Instagram, if you're following that, with these amazing like music battles, that are literally just shot vertically on an iPhone in most cases. Sometimes they're HD, most times they're not. Like that's the type of content that we're all gravitating towards right now, especially during pandemic. And you just need to try to be as authentic and true to yourself as possible. And it doesn't need to be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to the kind of the arc of social again, right? It's millennials were kind of at the forefront of pushing social into the world, right? And we kind of created this whole brand of influencers and this whole concept of influencers and making your life look really pretty and shiny and perfect on Instagram. And so then there was a reaction to that from Gen Z of like, your life's not really like that, you know, like you're lying, right? So then they come out with TikTok on the channel that was built during their perfect, you know, time of life. And they have this raw content of, you know, they putting a towel on their head and now they're transformed from a guy to a girl because they have long hair with the towel, right? So I think it's reflective of society as well, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I know we only have a few minutes left and I have so many questions for you ladies. All right, so I definitely want to get to a question that I have specifically for Mallory. So tell me a little bit about the podcast, Who We Are, and kind of how that came about and what you think it's going to do for society currently.
Repeat the question again?
So tell me a little bit about the podcast, Who We Are, and how you think it's going to affect society right now and why it's the perfect time to launch it and what you're excited about.
Yeah, so I do have a podcast, and I think that now is the perfect time to launch podcasts because, to Brenna's point, you don't need to have them be perfect. You don't need to be in a studio with like studio quality mics. I literally record my podcast over Zoom with two of my friends every week, and I literally edit it myself in GarageBand. So I think back to what we talked about earlier, content is at the core of everything that you're going to be doing, and you're trying to reach your customers in new and interesting ways. And I feel that podcasting is a medium that is perfect for that. And we've seen more and more brands coming out with podcasts to try to connect deeper sides of their story to their consumers.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I think we can't have this conversation without diving into TikTok a little bit, right? So tell me a little bit about your thoughts on, you know, how a brand should decide if they should be on TikTok, or brands that you think are perfect for TikTok that should launch a TikTok, or TikTok campaigns that you thought were really effective.
So I really follow a lot of skincare and hair care brands now. And I think that if you're selling a product, if you're doing something that's like limited release, like TikTok is perfect for you to kind of drum up that anticipation and excitement for those new drops. Obviously, I love everything that Rihanna and her empire are doing. Fenty Beauty, Fenty Skin, Savage by Fenty. I love Outdoor Voices. I love Girlfriend. I think that if you are a brand that is focused on fashion, lifestyle, skincare, beauty, music, like TikTok will be perfect for you.
This one's a tough one. I have a lot of friends in social media who are, you know, director and heads of for a lot of brands, and it's hard because what you see on TikTok first and foremost is people, right? Is people like showing their day, or like having funny moments with their kids, or like, you know, doing the latest trend or challenge. How do you do that if you're Lyft, you know, or how do you do that if you're Stitch Fix, right? So I think it's almost the way that we've been thinking about it is like, is there an ambassador program? Is there employees? Is there riders? You know, are there real humans who could maybe represent what the experience is in a car, or like, you know, 10 things that you know, 10 things that make sense in a Lyft ride, something like that. Soliciting that content from other people and like pulling it into our channel is maybe something that we are thinking through. but yeah, it's tough because it's like, who's the face of your brand on TikTok? If you, and it's probably easier for like beauty brands because it's literally like a face and like a tutorial, but for some of these other brands, it's a little challenging. And I think, yeah, I think it'll be a really interesting 2021 for like just paying attention to what's going on TikTok, like seeing how brands experiment. I think Chipotle has done a really great job. You know, they like, they have some funny content on there that's produced by other people that's about the like in-store experience, and like they've also done some of the more paid focused campaigns where they had the guac song and stuff that just totally made, like, you would never know it was branded Chipotle, but it was Chipotle who paid for it. They made the song, it like caught fire. So I think they're one that does a really good job.
Yeah, and I think people don't necessarily realize that quite yet, that you can start your own challenge with a song. And, you know, I remember seeing the eyes, lip, face challenge on TikTok for weeks before I realized it was the e.l.f. brand.
Yeah.
Eyes, lips, face. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's genius. Like, I didn't even realize that I was being marketed to, and I was just loving all these videos. So I think there's a lot of room for creativity. And do you guys think that when you look at, you know, TikTok versus Instagram Reels versus kind of Snapchat creeping back in, who do you think is going to be the victor in 2021?
I mean, we all know that Zuck is going to Zuck. So really trying to make Reels happen.
Yeah.
I know if you read Taylor Lorenz's amazing piece in the New York Times comparing TikTok and Reels, where she literally said that Reels is just like a sad replica of TikTok because it's not as natural and easy to edit your audio and sync it to your video. So if TikTok finds like a great buyer, if other things happen in this country, like maybe TikTok will come out on top because people realize it's much easier to build that connection. Reels is just like a massive audience piggybacking off of Instagram. I like to say that Instagram is like 5 platforms now. So if you're a brand, if you're a startup, it's so much easier for you to just be an early adopter and get on Reels because you're going to show up on the Explore page, because Instagram is just really trying to have mass user adoption for Reels.
Yeah, if you think about like when stories launched, you know, anybody that got onto stories early, like your stories are always right at the top of the highlights.
Yeah, exactly. I think Instagram is, I'm honestly like gaming the algorithm right now to favor Reels. So if, you know, you're an early adopter of Reels as a brand, you're going to show up just by nature of like them trying to make it happen. But I would say, I wonder what's, you know, Instagram, we all use it, we all love it, we all go on it. I think the difference between that and TikTok is I like to say, like, Instagram knows what I'll buy and TikTok knows my soul. because the way the algorithm works on TikTok, it's not about followers, it's not about like your, you know, demographics, it's not about like things you've clicked on before, it's really just about the content, right? So you could have like 50 followers but have a really funny TikTok and all of a sudden it has like 5.2 million views, you know? And that's because the algorithm favors the content versus like the person who's created that content, and the algorithm, you know, behaviors of everybody else. It's just like, it's good content. So and that's why the For You page of TikTok, I think like we probably all, you know, experienced it where you're like, oh my God, this is totally me, like, or like they're speaking directly to me. And I think with Instagram too, it's just like, I mean, let's be real, everyone is kind of fallen out of love, I think, a little bit with Facebook. It's just become too much. It's like games, it's Cash App, it's like, you know, like it's just too much sometimes. And I think I fear that Instagram will eventually go that way, where it's trying to be a replica of Facebook over time. Like, I think the worlds are going to merge and it'll just be too confusing and too bloated. And so it's kind of nice to just see TikTok, like be its own thing. I'm sure they will expand into like e-commerce and all the, you know, all these other, yeah, Exactly. They'll get there. They'll get there. But I think they're just fundamentally tuned algorithmically to be a little different. And the other thing I'll finish on is, Lauren, you kind of said, you spoke on it really well, that like we've kind of grown up in social media, right? This generation. We've seen what happens when there's fake news and bullying, and the vanity content makes us all look inward and think like, well, what am I doing with my life if they're like on this amazing world trip and I'm just like here in my random office. You kind of like start to feel insecure about your own life. And I think what's different about TikTok, and I don't want to like hype it up too much, but it feels like a much more positive community. And like, even if you're having a down day and you're authentically sharing that with fellow TikTokers, it's like the comments are just so uplifting compared to some of the other comments that you see on some of these other platforms. So
yeah, I definitely agree. I used to be like a huge Twitter person, having like working in media. Twitter was a huge part of my job, and it just feels like there's just a lot of vitriol on the platform these days. So I find myself gravitating more towards Instagram, getting TikToks from friends, because my friends literally text me TikToks all the time. And even YouTube, I've kind of gone back to YouTube in a bigger way during the past few months, just to watch more of these slice of life videos from my favorite influencers. Literally watching like 30-minute videos of people showing me like a week in the life of what they're doing. Like that is just grounding me and giving me so much joy right now. So I completely agree with you. Like social will continue to evolve, and I think it's going to be more like inward and more niche platforms that's really going to like rise to the top.
Love that. So we've got a few more minutes before we go to Q&A. So what would be one resource that you would recommend to anybody that just wants to learn more about social, just in general?
I always tell people to pick up the book The Four by Scott Galloway. I saw him speak at an event 2 years ago, and I'm never a person to like rise up to my feet during like a marketing conference, but like, he just gets it. And I think it's really important when you are starting off with social media for your business to learn about the industry before you make decisions on which platforms you're going to embark on your messaging strategy. So I always tell people, read The Four by Scott Galloway, check out Later. It's like an amazing Instagram visual scheduling tool and service, and they've got a wonderful blog. I also tell people to check out Wall Street's CMO newsletter. They send it every weekday, and it's like a great place to learn about the industry and to see what other people are doing in the space. And those are my like big resources.
Yeah, I would say like the one thing I think that for social people in social, I think the one thing you can do is I like to say like swim laps on the internet. Like you don't have to have a a Twitter account for like your company, but you should have one for yourself. And even if you never post anything personally, but just be on there, like just see what other people are doing. Look at these things daily, because you'll suddenly like discover something new or a trend, and like it's where culture is happening. So like not just Twitter, I'm talking about all the platforms. Like I'm not a Facebook fan, but I'm on it, and I peek in every once in a while just to see what's new. But I think just like making sure that your social platforms are like a full ecosystem, and you're visiting your gardens daily, and you're just checking out like what's going on in it. I think you will learn so much. And you'll start to like see what other companies are doing. You'll start to see what influencers are doing. You'll start to see what's trending, and then all of a sudden that will spark some ideas, and you'll start to think like, hey, why don't I try that? Or like, oh, that's an interesting spin on this thing I've been thinking about doing. And also to sign up for I'm trying to think of like the name of the newsletter. Maybe I can follow up after I find it, but there are a lot of culture and insight newsletters. Like The Hustle is one that I really like, where they recap just kind of the top things that you need to know about this morning. Morning Brew is another one.
Internet Brunch, do you follow that one?
Which one?
Internet Brunch by Big Space.
Yes, exactly. Like there's all kinds of newsletters that recap what you need to know. So I would just say play on these platforms, be on these platforms, even if it's just in a voyeuristic way, just to kind of just keep pulse. But yeah, swim laps on the internet is what I like to say.
I really like that phrasing, and I think it gives us a visual of something that I've always thought about with when it comes to social is that social media is one giant conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So either you can be on the sidelines listening to the conversation, or you can be a part of it talking. But you have to know when to hop in and how to hop in, right? So I think if you're not participating in the conversation, it's going to be really hard. If you haven't been watching the conversation, it's going to be hard to participate.
Yeah, and I would say too, like, don't ignore places like LinkedIn.
Yeah. Oh
Like,
my gosh. Yeah.
like I feel like LinkedIn kind of is the forgotten platform, but I've been on it. I've been a huge fan of it. HP was one of the first companies to reach like 1 million followers on it, so I've been an advocate of it since day one.
Yeah.
And I've noticed there too, especially during the pandemic, I think with people being laid off and furloughed, there's just like there's a surge of thought leadership content
Yeah.
that's happening there. And so like play on that platform a little bit more and like follow certain people and like just consume.
I love it. All right, Lauren. So do I kick it over to you for Q&A?
I can help because there is quite a bit of questions we got. You guys just have to be so amazing. So our first question came from Jamie, and I'm sure all of you can answer this. Do you have any recommendations for landing a job in social and content?
Mm. Yeah, that is a really good one. I think maybe 4 or 5 years ago, it was a lot easier because the territory was still new. I think the expectations are high for you to have some level of experience. So I would say if you can get an internship on a communications team or marketing team, or if you can, if you have a side business maybe and you can, experiment with like Instagram, or maybe you're an influencer. I mean, I've seen a lot of people who have a day job, but like also have a very strong Instagram presence of their own and they make some money on the side. They're a travel Instagrammer or blogger or whatever. I think just get to a place where you have some level of portfolio work that can show like how you built a strategy and how you produce content. I think that will help. And any way you can do that, whether that's an internship or side gig or get your own branding off the ground or get like into influencer space a little more, I think that would help. That would be, a good place to start.
Yeah, I would also say, like, obviously it's difficult in these current situation and times, but going to meetups was like a big help for me when I was first starting out. I went to the community managers meetup a lot. It's in New York. They probably have taken it virtually by now, but Meetup, that's another platform that's still there. And it's a great place to find like cool events and to connect with people. So I would say like get yourself out there in the industry. Like cold emailing on LinkedIn actually does work. I look at my actual inbox. Maybe I'm opening myself up to a flood of messages, but I do look at my inbox. I do like to connect with people and give advice because that was like very valuable to me when I was first starting out. I will also say the media industry is a great place to get your start in social. If you've got great writing chops and you are like a casual tweeter and you're constantly on Twitter all the time, like you can get a great job in social manning like a Twitter feed for like New York Times or Wall Street Journal or Washington Post. Like their social teams always are growing and they always need people to help out, and that'll be a great place to get your feet wet in the industry, and then you can kind of grow from there if you wanted to go more brand side or agency side.
Yeah, I'll just add one more thing because Mallory, you made me think of it. Don't discount agencies. Like getting in at like an RGA or a Digitas or somebody like, even if you're just coming in as like, I don't know, like a account supervisor or something, like you're just managing, the day-to-day budget of a client account, like you will get a front row seat to how it all works. You will get like to work with a creative director, you'll get to work with an analytics team, you'll get to work with, a video production team, you will get to work with a strategist, you'll get to work with like senior leadership. So you'll pick up how you present to executives. Like, I think a lot of people are like, oh, but I want to be on, I want to work at Lyft. And it's like, well, Lyft will pay attention to you if you have a whole like book of business that you've had some exposure on, right? So, and I think the fastest, quickest way to do that sometimes is to just get your foot in the door at an agency so you can get a front row seat to seeing how it all works. And the other thing is you will get exposure to different sizes of clients. You might work on a huge client that's like paying the agency $2 million a year to run this big thing, or you might just get a project that's like, 50K, and you have to make it work, and you have to be creative and scrappy and just kind of like hope for the best, and yeah, you will just get a lot of experience. So I can't advocate enough for that. And that's coming from someone who's been on both sides of the fence, like agency and in-house. Yeah. My time on the agency side was so valuable. And I like also too, I think the vibe is different. You'll feel more, it's more of a collegial environment where everyone is like working together for the win. And on the inside, sometimes it's like working together for, in the interest of what benefits my team. So there's a little bit of that, but I would, check out agencies, just get your foot in the door where you can.
Yeah. And I would, echo that with our agency. Like, we're currently looking for interns, and we have that experience, or we have that opportunity where you can see all the different experiences from one viewpoint. And it's been really great for our past interns. So we'd love to hear from you if you're looking for a role now.
Come work for Lauren, go.
Yeah.
So like how I said before, we do have quite a bit of questions. I'll try to get to as many of them as possible. And we'll try to keep them as general. So if you have very specific questions pertaining to your business, we probably will not get to those today. Any tips for managing multiple users on brand accounts?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is the bear of Instagram, but and then getting kicked off Instagram constantly. But I'll let the ladies answer this one.
Yeah, I would say investing in like a social media management platform like Sprout Social will be very key, because then you're not having to do two-factor to your personal like phone or email, because you have like a vetted platform that's already secure, that can handle multiple users. Even Buffer, like it's free for a certain point. I always tell people Buffer is amazing. I started like my career using Buffer as my tool of choice. So getting like a nice, affordable social media management system will allow you to scale.
100% agree with that. And there's different levels of tools. Like if you're a big, huge global company like an HP, you're going to want something that can permission different levels, etc. Or if you're just like, even me, like sometimes I use Buffer to just manage my own social profiles. Right. But huge, like time saver. You can schedule things. You can, manage who has access to what. So highly recommend that you look at that too. There's Sprout Social as well. That's another one.
Mm-hmm. That's what we use.
Question came in from Shannon. What are the differences in types of content that you post to your platforms? Do some forms work better on specific social media platforms and garner more engagement, i.e. content for Facebook versus Insta versus Twitter, etc.?
Yeah, this is like the bane of my existence. I've seen it at every company where like the social media team is kind of like the central team. So if like there's an events team who's done an event, or there's a PR team who's got a press release, or there's an executive who wants to share a blog article, it's like everyone comes to the social team and like, can you just post? Just post. Right? And like we look at it and we go, okay, well, it's not formatted, there's no picture, there's no nothing, the link is long, the copy's long. So I constantly am championing, like, think about the platform, think about the user behavior of the platform, and customize the content for that. Because LinkedIn is very different than Twitter, and Twitter is very different than Instagram stories, and you cannot have a one size fits all. If you try, you will look lame and your metrics will suffer. And so just pause, pump the brakes, and really think about like what, and maybe it's just like one platform and one piece of content, but like where will this have the most impact, rather than just like spreading it across the internet and hoping for the best, because it just doesn't work.
Yeah, like I really picked up on those skills when I was working at Popular Science because they're a magazine and they had like a small website and I had to transform like big cover stories and features into social content. So it's literally picking apart pieces of that content and distributing it in the most native way to that platform. So if we were doing like a big feature on like house governmental affairs and like things coming out about climate change, I would pull out different quotes from an article and put that into like a Twitter thread because that made sense for Twitter. And then I would work with the author and like the editors to get some visual images, maybe some videos, audio, and put that up on YouTube, put that up on Instagram, put that up on Facebook. So really trying to like translate that one piece of content in different mediums where it makes sense for that audience.
I think the New York Times does an amazing job of that. Like the New York Times does a great job, but then you've got New York Times opinions, you've got New York Times cooking. Like they really understand like which platforms are the best for what. And you can sometimes see the same story across platform, but it's the way they serve it up is drastically different on each one. So check them out for inspiration.
Completely agree.
Okay, we have a question from Raina, and I hope I said your name right, Raina. She said, questions for you badass ladies. I want to do her justice and read the whole thing. Email service providers, any tips of which ones you like best? Are they worth it? And then, and separately, like any big mistakes that you guys have made when you first got started in your career?
I can definitely speak to ESPs because I deal with ESPs a lot at New York Mag. It's very tricky to find a good one. I will say that like Mailchimp gets the job done. That's like a perfect ESP to start with. Campaign Monitor is also like another great one to start with. They've got free and paid programs. Campaign Monitor also owns Sale Through. So if you have a little bit more money to spend and you want to get more sophisticated with your targeting to kind of increase those opens, like we use Sale Through and Campaign Monitor at Vox Media and we see great results. So it's kind of like picking your social platform based on like your objective and your budget. You can get the best ESP that works for you.
Yeah, I would say I've done some consulting with some small business, like friends who have restaurants and stuff. And Mailchimp, if you're just kind of like getting your feet wet and like email, it's very user friendly, and a lot of features they have are free. So yeah, experiment with that one for sure. But then yeah, to Mallory's point, you can like scale up to more like enterprise level stuff over time.
Sweet. I hope they did you justice, Raina. So many good questions. When is the best time for advertising on Instagram after you start a business? Is there any rule or best approach?
Well, go ahead, Mallory.
No, I'm just saying, are you asking about time of day or when you actually start your presence?
So that person submitted anonymously. So I'm going to go with when to start your actual presence.
Got it. You can go for it, Brenna.
Yeah, I mean, no time like the present. You know, like if you to kind of how we kicked off the conversation, like if you really mapped out like who you're trying to talk to, what your KPIs are, what message, what's your product messaging, what are the benefits, what's the value, look at your competitors, you know, why not jump on Instagram? I would say maybe if you're a B2B company, there's probably other platforms you should explore, or like maybe you just like light touch Instagram and it's mostly like Instagram stories for now. I think GE does a really good job like speaking to a B2B audience on Instagram, so they're one to check out. As far as like time of day goes, just going back to these tools like the Buffers of the world and, you know, Sprout Social and stuff, like they will, as you funnel your content through these tools, content management tools, social management tools, eventually they will report on that for you. They'll say like, hey, like over the last 30 days, like noon on Instagram for you on a Wednesday is the best time to post. So just again, going back to those tools, they'll be a huge help in helping think through some of that stuff.
And I would say if you're like a B2C company or like a D2C company, like Glossier, Brooklyn and Parachute, a lot of those brands have amazing Instagram strategies And if you look at how they're doing product launches,
Mhm.
like before a product is released, they really do some great like ramp up marketing to get their audience excited. And so like the product isn't even available, it's not out. So they're literally doing soft launches of their messaging on Instagram, like even putting like beautiful panoramic images. Like Glossier puts great images of like the sky to match the packaging of the product that's coming out. Like there are subtle things that you can do if you don't have a product out to like get your messaging across and to build excitement through Instagram.
I'll just add to that that now is a great time because pandemic, right? Like,
That's
I don't know about you guys, but I know for us, March, April, May was the highest engagement we've had in months. And so I think it's starting to trend down a little bit depending on industry, but people are on their phones, so don't be shy.
I recently pulled some research for our team at Lyft, and the average time since the pandemic, and it's not gone down, people have increased their social media habits by 2 hours. So if they were like spending a lot of time on it before, plus up 2 hours at least. So, and that's like not going to go away anytime soon. So
So I'm going to answer, again, we received so many questions, about 2 or 3 more acknowledging that we are at time. So if you have to head out, we will be sharing the recording as I mentioned. So Scott, I'll answer your question because I know you sent it twice. How do you decide when certain social networks or email marketing itself isn't working for you and to avoid it? When the ROI isn't there, or are there some marketing platforms that you just have to have?
great.
yeah, that is a good question. I think I think you think through, just kind of going back to the strategy conversation, like really it's the art and the science, right? So like being on these platforms, just to be on them is a good first step. Tracking, testing, optimizing, making sure like what's working, what's not. I mean, Mallory, I'd love your opinion on this, but I think like we often think like we need to be on all of them. Just, oh, well, it's an awareness play, so we need to be on everything. And like my team at Lyft is very small right now. We're growing, but like we can't be on everything. We literally don't have the people and the bandwidth to monitor and manage all these platforms. So I think just taking a step back and thinking about where's your audience, where could you possibly have the most impact, focusing, maybe you start with one and you like treat that as your incubator. Like you test and learn and test and learn, and then you start to branch out into some of the other platforms. That's one way to go about it. I think too, if you're running ads, like as you're starting to see things creep up into the $4, $5, $6 range, like maybe it's time to rethink that platform or that ads. There's other ways to advertise that are much cheaper, like Google search, for example, things like that. So don't put all your eggs in one basket up front. Like really try to experiment and see how you can, cross-pollinate across other platforms and other advertising formats.
I will also say that like we have small social teams at Vox Media across like all of our different publications. We're on all of our social platforms in existence, but it's the amount of time that we're spending on each that is kind of like the factor. So if Instagram is doing really well for us in a given month, if we're seeing like tons of traffic and we're seeing good conversions, then maybe it's shifting for a certain period of time to spend more time on Instagram and less on Twitter and less on Facebook, and just kind of keeping those always on, as we say. So like they're churning, like maybe you've just got your buffer or your Sprout social feed going, and if you have like some new messaging, you literally have content that's scheduled and ready to go, but you're spending more time and you're putting more dollars into Instagram because you're seeing more results. And maybe the next month it changes, and Twitter for some reason is like spiking in traffic for you, and you're getting a ton of people coming to your site from Twitter. Then like shift it over to Twitter for a certain month and like put all of your marketing dollars there. So it's really that science, like trying to figure out like where am I going to get the most ROAS? Where is the most bang for my platform to happen? Because back in the old days of social in 2008, 2009, you had to be everywhere. But now it's really about getting the most out of your marketing spend.
I remember when Google Plus launched, and like I was at HP.
I remember being told, go figure out a Google Plus strategy.
Yeah, and it launched, and I was like, everyone internally at HP was like, oh, we have to be on it. We have to be on it. I mean, now look, where is it, right? So yeah, just be careful of the bright, shiny object. Like, yes, we're all talking about TikTok. I do see value in TikTok. We will probably play a little bit more on TikTok because the data is showing like people are spending like 81 hours a month on that thing at a minimum. So like we'll probably get there eventually, but like, I don't know, we're not really on Snapchat, you know?
Mhm.
So just, I think like just be voyeuristic, like kind of see where things go over time. And like Mallory said, experiment and, you know, shift things as you go.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about that conversation, right? Like you have to know what the conversation is before you can give your opinion. So if you're not watching those channels or platforms, you won't really know how to show up. And I also champion the idea of asking for help, you know, so if this is your first advertising campaign, like ask all your friends that are in social, read a lot, don't just launch it, let it run for 2 months and then say it was a failure.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot more that goes into it than that. Yeah.
So one of our last questions, you talked about before in terms of like, not being on everything, but separately, someone, Bess in particular, said she heard once from a well-known influencer, it's best to segment your accounts. So one for hobbies, one for business, one for personal. What do you feel about merging versus keeping separate accounts for all of these different interests? Something I struggle with too.
I think that, I mean, I think one thing to keep in mind is that social media advice changes very fast. So I don't know when the influencer said that, but keep that in mind too, as far as timing. I think when I first started in social, it was very like, you keep your business life on one side and your personal life on another. But now I think depending on what you're marketing or the brand that you have, you can merge it together and it's more interesting, right? Like we want to know that our financial coach also loves to rock climb. Like, you know, it just brings you closer in that conversation.
Yeah, I would also add to what I've seen happen in the last probably 2 years is executives are now also becoming like the face of the brand. I think, yeah, I think her name, Kara from Hint, the water soda company. She herself is like almost like the brand, right? So she's super active on Twitter. She's super active on Instagram. She does a lot of thought leadership, and that also can help elevate. So it's to Lauren's point. It's like humanizing, right? To see the people you work with or the people who represent these companies be on these platforms in addition to their company's presence. So I would check out the team at Hint as well for some inspiration.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with everything you ladies said. Like John Laguerre from T-Mobile kind of like pioneered the CEO's social platform. So having his own separate Twitter account and Facebook account from T-Mobile. And I think over time they kind of folded that into T-Mobile, but he still is like an active presence that's on like T-Mobile social platforms. So people can learn about him and his love of magenta and everything. So I think that like maybe like 5 years ago, I would have told someone that they should be segmenting and like LinkedIn should be business only and like Instagram should only be like polished filtered images. But now like everything's gravy, like everything is merging together. So long as like you're true and you're authentic, that's the key. If you're authentic on whichever platform you are, like you don't need to go crazy segmenting, especially when you're starting out.
Yep.
Sweet. Okay, so our last question. Can you talk about, all of you, I'm curious to know, of like, what's one marketing moment that you are proud of? And then also, what are you, doing to stay creative? It doesn't have to be, reading newsletters, but, is it like, yarning, doing yarn or cross stitching? And yeah, we'll wrap with on that note.
Yeah. I can't think of a specific campaign or moment. It's just the teams that I've been on over the years, both like in-house and on the agency side. I've been fortunate to work with really creative people. There's like the strategy side of it and the actual creative side of it, where like you have these teams and this mind meld between people where, you get to do the first ever thing, right? So like I've just benefited from being at HP, where we were the first brand to like launch live stream concerts on Twitter. We were the first brand to be on LinkedIn. You know, on the agency side, I was working on Ubisoft, and we were like the first brand to climb Mount Everest, to play a game on the top of Mount Everest. I mean, just I personally have gravitated towards teams that are super interested in experimenting, and like if it fails, it fails, but at least we tried, and that invigorates me. And yeah, I don't know, Mallory, if you have.
No, like that's exactly true. Like I love being on teams where breaking things, building them up again, trying new stuff out. Like what I mentioned earlier, like my idea to make the strategist to own like Prime Day. Like I just literally had that idea, and my boss was like, "Yeah, let's do it. Let's like workshop it out and see how it's gonna work." I pitched it to like New York Magazine's editorial team, worked with the rest of my team to make it happen, and we did it, and it lasted 2 days, and we got a lot of great business from it. And so I'm most proud of these moments where I have an idea, any idea, and I'm able to be surrounded by creative people who are accepting and open and ready for new challenges, who just give me the freedom to do it. And you just create something amazing.
Yeah, and sometimes it doesn't have to be like publicly facing, like the first brand to do whatever, and like you're an ad age and stuff. Sometimes like the internal win is important, right? So like it's the first time Lyft has ever done. It's not like the first time any company's ever, but it's like the first time Lyft tried to do something different, which like is not super innovative or sexy to the outside world, but internally everyone's like, yeah, we're doing it, you know? So sometimes like that can go a long way as well. And then I think the second piece of the question was like, where do you get your inspiration and creativity from? Like I said, I went to school for design, so I don't get to play a lot in in Photoshop as much as I want. So sometimes when I'm like feeling like I just need to stop looking at social and stop looking at Slack and stop looking at emails and stuff, sometimes I'll just like go do a tutorial on YouTube just to like keep my design skills fresh. And to me it's more about like art, drawing, Photoshop, Illustrator. I mean, that just happens to be because I went to school for that stuff, and it's just like something I like to do. So
yeah, music, obviously I went to school for it. I bought this piano during pandemic, so like when I'm stressed out, I literally can just go from my desk to my piano, play some Mozart for a little bit, come back, get back into it. So music is like my core. It's what grounds me. It's what centers me. It's kind of how I like equate being a good marketer, because I'm literally performing in the same way that I would be in front of an audience, except they're on the internet, on digital screens. So music is just what keeps me going. It keeps me creative.
I love that. I think for me, I have a couple wins that we're really proud of that I can think of recently. And the first one was how one of our clients and our agency reacted to COVID. One of our clients is BB's Tex Orleans down in Houston, Texas, and they're a restaurant with 10 locations. And so of course they were immediately affected by COVID, but their internal team just got to work, created a drive-through, created a new menu, did all the things that they needed to do to get the attention of the customers, new deals, new specials. And our team reacted just as quickly and helped them market that to the public, and to great success. And so we're really proud that we were able to help them get through those first bumpy months of COVID. But then more recently, we did a kind of a more creative project, which I think kind of touches on the second half of the question too, where we're all at home, and our team was thinking like, how can we do something a little different for the people in our network that we love and we can't see right now in person? So we created a postcard and we mailed it out to all of our closest friends and networks. And it had each of the team members with a virtual Zoom background of where they wish they could have traveled this summer. And so I think I've actually got one right here. I can show you. But it came out pretty cute. Is it upside down? Yeah. And we got a lot of fun feedback of like, oh my God, you sent me mail, So I think it's fun just going back to things that haven't been done in a while is a fun way to, I don't know, to be creative. And then I think outside of that, For me, it's yoga. I started practicing yoga pretty heavily in February, and man, it's just a nice way to take a break from the day and just, you know, especially when we could go into studios. The best thing for me was that my phone was locked in a locker in the lobby and no one could talk to me. You know, and I think as being on social and being social media leaders, everybody wants to talk to you all the time. There's always a question, there's always an issue. And so I think having that separation that I couldn't affect, that I just was a part of the moment in the yoga studio, and everything would happen, you know, on my phone, and I would get to it later, really helped calm me down.
Sweet. Well, it's 1:15. We went 15 minutes over. I just want to say thank you to Lauren, Mallory, Bryna for really just giving us such wonderful insight in the chat. We had so much positive feedback. I'm like taking notes here. I just want to say thank you. And we'll, of course, share the recording and where you can stay in touch with all of our panelists. Again, I'm going to put in the chat if you're interested in grabbing some Rise coffee. They're offering the GA community a discount. And we hope you enjoy the rest of your Friday and the long weekend. Thank you again, guys. This was amazing.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.